Welcome back to our continuing walk through the Olivet Discourse in Luke's Gospel. This has been a busy summer. I've been traveling a lot. I've been teaching a lot, juggling a lot of different things. But I told you we're not going to not get through Luke's Olivet Discourse. So we have this video and possibly one, maybe two more, but I think we can wrap it up in one because so much of what we've covered in this series of Luke's Olivet Discourse, we've already really talked about in our walk through Mark's Olivet Discourse. So if you haven't seen the version of Mark, watch that first. That's the foundation. Luke, and then later, if we do Matthew, those will build upon what we've looked at in Mark. And real quick, if you appreciate this type of long-form teaching, we would love for you to tangibly show that by subscribing and enabling notifications when you do. Great way to help this channel grow and to tell YouTube, hey, we want more of this type of unapologetically long-form, non-TikTok, non-Instagram reel, non-YouTube shorts teaching. You guys keep watching, we'll keep doing it. All right, let's jump back into Luke 21. So just a recap, if you're new to this series, I've been pulling from different commentators on Luke's version of the Olivet Discourse. They're here on the screen. There's a wide range of commentators, views, traditions, theologies, basically spanning the last 50 years of Luke's scholarship. And one of them in particular, Joel Green, in his commentary has pointed out that the way Luke uses the Olivet Discourse in his overall narrative of the book of Luke and Acts. Remember, Luke and Acts are volume 1 and volume 2 of Luke's gospel. So don't ever stop when you finish Luke and go somewhere else. Read Acts to get the rest of the story. It's kind of unfortunate that John interrupts Luke and Acts in our Bibles. It would have been better, honestly, if Luke and Acts had stayed together, because then you'd get to see the overarching meta-narrative that Luke is constructing. And one of the things Joel Green talks about is, as you read the book of Acts, you start to see what Jesus predicted would happen to his followers in the Olivet Discourse happening to Jesus's followers throughout the book of Acts. There are these literary links. So they are living out the things that Jesus said would happen to them in the Olivet Discourse. So let's recap real quick, and then we'll jump back to what Green had noted. Backing up, we looked at this in the last video, verse 8, and he said, "Watch yourselves, do not be led astray. Many will come in my name, saying, I am, ego eimi, and the kairos, the appointed time, has come. Do not follow after them. But when you hear about wars and revolts, do not be terrified, for these must happen first. But it is not immediately the end." We looked at that in the last episode. Then he said to them, people will be raised up over people, and kingdom over kingdom, or you could say nation will be raised up against nation. Great earthquakes, and in various places famines and plagues there will be, and terrors. And there will be great signs from heaven. But before all these, they will lay their hands on y'all, and this is my southern way of pulling out the plural yous in the Olivet Discourse. They will lay their hands on y'all and persecute, handing over to the synagogues and guards, being brought before kings and governors for the sake of my name. It will turn out for a witness, or as a witness, / testimony, witness, testimony. Martyrion is this word in Greek. It means witness, or it means the testimony that a witness gives. Verse 14, set therefore y'all's hearts not to rehearse how to be defended. So not to, and this word promeleton, not to, it means to rehearse, not to go and practice beforehand what you're going to say, what your apologethenai, how you will be defended. This is where apologetics comes from. Don't do that. Jesus is like, don't worry about that. For I myself will give to y'all a mouth and wisdom against which they won't be able to stand or respond to all the ones opposing y'all. But y'all will be handed over, even by parents and siblings and relatives and friends. They will put to death some of you, and y'all will be hated by everyone on account of my name. But a hair from y'all's head, and this is a double apostrophe, we do this in the South, plural you, possessive. So, but a hair from you guys' head will not be destroyed. By you guys, y'all's endurance, possess y'all's souls. Or this could be translated as y'all will possess your soul. So it could be like a command or it could just be a simple statement. And then he'll go on in verse 20, but when you see being surrounded by troops, Jerusalem, then know that it has come near her desolation. Then the ones in Judea must flee to the mountains, and the ones in their midst must not depart, and the ones in the countryside must not enter into her. For days of vengeance are these, days being fulfilled, everything that has been written. Woe to the pregnant ones. And we've looked at this in Mark's version as well, talking about the destruction, the fall of Jerusalem, the siege, how horrible it will be. Then there's the signs that will be in the heavens, the day of the Lord, pulling from those same Old Testament passages that Mark was pulling from, the Son of Man coming on a cloud with power and much glory. And these things beginning to happen, stand tall and lift up y'all's heads because y'all's redemption is drawing near. And then Jesus tells parables. He talks about the fig tree, and then he declares that the whole creation will pass away, but this generation will not pass away until everything happens. And then he gives them one more warning to watch themselves, don't be carried away in life's drunkenness, carousing, but to stay awake. And that's the end of Luke's Olivet Discourse. So in commenting on this, Joel Green, he says, within the narrative of Luke Acts, Jesus' eschatological discourse, the Olivet Discourse, functions in part as a proleptic announcement of the experience of both Jesus himself and his followers in the days and years ahead. Jesus is giving the program of what's going to happen, first of all, to himself. He will be the one who's handed over. He will be the one who's brought before kings and governors. He will be the one who's hated by his own people. Like, he's going to experience all of this. And also then in Acts, his followers will start to experience it as well. And some examples that Green notes in verse 8 through 11, it talks about great earthquakes, famine, and heavenly portents, things in the heavens. Well, we see that. Luke 23:45, we're going to see it. Acts 2, 1 through 4. Acts 2, 19 through 20. Acts 4:31. Acts 11:28. 16:26. These things are going to start happening in that first generation. In verse 12 through 19, he talks about being delivered over to prisons. That's going to be fulfilled in the career of Jesus in chapters 22 and 23, and frequent experience of the witnesses in Acts. You'll see it in Acts 4, Acts 5, Acts 8, Acts 12, Acts 16. They will be taken before kings and governors. Jesus is taken before kings and governors in Luke 23, and the apostles are taken before kings and governors in Acts 9, Acts 12, Acts 23, Acts 25, Acts 26. And also in verse 12 through 19, persecution will provide the opportunity to bear witness, a prediction that finds fulfillment in, for example, Acts 3, Acts 4, Acts 5, Acts 20, Acts 26. So it's not haphazard and it's not random the way Luke is crafting the narrative of the book of Acts and the Olivet Discourse, what he is choosing to highlight from what Jesus was speaking and preaching every day in the temple. Jesus, remember, he was teaching every day in the temple. It's not like he gave this message one time and then was gone. He was teaching. There was a lot of material. So Luke and the other gospel writers are calling from a huge body. I mean, John even says if all the books in the world couldn't contain all the things that Jesus said or did, probably some hyperbole there, but the meaning is very clear. Jesus said and did a lot more than just what we have in the Gospels. So the gospel authors are crafting something very specifically. And so in this case, he is preparing his followers for what's going to happen. Verse 12, pro de tuton panton, before all these things, all the things that he had just said in the previous verses that are going to start happening in and around 70 AD and the decades leading up to 70 AD. Before that, before it's even close to the end and nation rising against nation and all that stuff that we looked at in the last episode, what they need to expect is that they are going to have people lay their hands on them, hand them over to the synagogues and the guards, paradidontes, being handed over to the synagogues. There's the word, synagogas, kefulakas, and the guards, apagomenus, brought before, not voluntarily, basilis ke hegemonas, kings and governors or rulers. Is where we get the word hegemon from. So that's terrifying. And Jesus gives them reassurance in verse 13. It will turn out, it will end up being for y'all, martyrion, a witness. There's a reason for your being handed over. There's a reason for your persecution, just like there's a reason that Jesus is going to be handed over and Jesus is going to ultimately be crucified. Jesus is fulfilling his mission not by getting around the persecution, but by going through it and bringing about salvation using Satan's own weapons against him, basically, which is human evil and the wicked condemning and ultimately killing the righteous, like all the weapons of the enemy. Jesus is going to use that. And that is the ultimate witness. That is what we witness to. And Jesus is called the faithful witness. Throughout the book of Revelation, this word, martyrion, takes on a heightened meaning when you see the mission of Jesus and what he is doing and what the gospel actually is. And in Revelation, you're going to see that it's actually through their being handed over and suffering even unto death and being a witness, martyrion, that the gospel goes forth and the world is transformed. So all of this finds ultimate fulfillment throughout the book of Revelation. If you want to see why that theme's important, do our free course here at Disciple Dojo, Revelation, a guided tour of the apocalypse. We walk through the entire book and you see very clearly how important this concept of martyrion actually is. So he says, it will turn out for y'all, or it will be a witness or a testimony. Verse 14, set therefore y'all's hearts not to rehearse how to be defended. And this is my, once again, very literalistic, woodenly literal translation, trying to show you the underlying Greek. This is not a polished English translation. You would do what all the good translations that are out there do and kind of smooth it out for English. But I'm wanting you to be able to see how the Greek is structured if you can't read the Greek text here on the left-hand side. And so he's saying, set your hearts, like make it a goal. To set your heart means to, plan on something, to intentionally seek something. And in this case, it's not to rehearse. You don't need an eloquent speech. You don't need to worry, what are you going to say when you're brought before someone and you're charged with following a foreign god, when you're charged with abandoning the religion of your ancestors, when you're charged with being a disgrace to your people because you follow this crucified carpenter from Galilee. What are you going to say? You don't need to have this whole elaborate, filled with pathos and emotion speech. You just speak what is put in your mouth, because verse 15, for I myself will give to y'all. And again, this is plural, y'all. This is not a promise only for certain Christians like the apostles. This is for all of God's people, all of his true disciples. I will give y'all a mouth and wisdom against which they won't be able to stand or respond, all the ones opposing y'all. Now, we'll see this play out in Stephen. You very much see this later in the book of Acts. Stephen is given wisdom, and it's like they can't refute what he's saying. And others, I think of like Apollos later, will have wisdom that can't be refuted. Like this, you'll see this in the book of Acts. I think it's Stephen and Apollos. I could be wrong on that because I haven't double checked, but I'm pretty sure. You'll see the apostles, Paul himself, will be able to refute people in the synagogues with wisdom that they can't respond to, that they can't refute. And this idea, I think there's definitely a nod to the Exodus, is, I will give to you a mouth. Like, what did God tell Moses when Moses was worried about what he would say to Pharaoh? He said, who is the one who gave you your mouth? Like, who put a mouth in you? I will speak to you. Like, it's not a quotation. It's definitely, I think, an illusion at least. But the idea is the God who created the mouth is the God who can fill and inspire that mouth when his people need it. And that's what Jesus is promising. So they don't have to rehearse these elaborate speeches or craft this perfect apologia to be able to respond to all the charges. That's great if you have time to do that kind of stuff, if you're engaging in a ministry where you are involved in back and forths and extended dialogue, but for his followers in the context of persecution, not in the context of just generally preaching the gospel and taking it out to the world and doing ministry and theology and apologetics. Not that context. In the context of persecution, he is saying, don't worry, I've got you. But you will be handed over, even by parents and siblings and relatives and friends. These are all of the social categories in the ancient world in an honor and shame family culture. These are the only things that matter. These are your closest people in your life, the most trusted people, your parents, your siblings, your relatives, cousins, aunts, uncles, and your friends. And Jesus is saying, even those bonds are going to be tested by your allegiance to me. And anyone who would come after me, he must, and Jesus gave this teaching during his life, he must hate his mother and father. He didn't mean literally hate them. This is a very Hebraic way of saying, your loyalty to this should be so great that in comparison, the greatest thing in the world that you love could be considered as hate. That's how the figure of speech works. So he's not literally commanding to hate your parents, but he is saying in terms of priority. It's just a colorful way of speaking. It's hyperbole. And he's saying that that is going to be tested by allegiance to him, and they will put to death some of you. Now, Jesus is talking to his followers. We know very soon one of them, James, the brother of John, one of the sons of Zebedee, one of the inner circle of Jesus, is going to be beheaded. John will not be beheaded. Peter will not be beheaded. James will be beheaded. And the disciples, they will be hated by everyone on account of his name. Everywhere they go, they're going to be hated. Now, does this mean every single person will hate them? No. This is hyperbole. This is general language, just like we do in English. We say things like all the time or everyone thinks this. We aren't speaking literally. There were people who loved the apostles. There were people who embraced Jesus. There were families of people who turned to Jesus, and the families did not. They remained within Judaism, but they didn't cut them off completely. So it's not like that's going to happen to every single person down to the number. But this is a general and perfectly acceptable way of saying you are going to be severely hated because of me. And ask any Jewish follower of Jesus today that you know about how they are generally treated by the non-Jesus following Jewish community. Ask any former Muslim follower of Jesus how they are generally treated by the Muslim community in general when they decide to follow Jesus. Ask any Hindu follower of Jesus how they are generally treated by their fellow villagers and people in areas steeped in Hindu nationalism, many of whom are personal friends of mine. Ask them their experience with parents and siblings and relatives and friends. This has been going on since the first century. It's nothing new, and Jesus warns his followers in advance. But then he says, verse 18, paradoxically, but a hair from y'all's head will not be destroyed. By your endurance, you will possess your soul or your life. This word, psukas, can be soul or life. And so there's a question, there's a textual variant here. In some manuscripts, it's ktesaste with an alpha here, and that is a command, like possess your lives. And in other manuscripts, it's kteseste with an epsilon, and that is an indicative, y'all will possess your lives. And these are manuscript variants, and I don't know which one is which. I think they both work. I think they're ultimately saying the same thing, but this is when the Greek text critical nerds can really dig in and, okay, which manuscript families say this and which say this, and let's look at the script, and they'll get on, CSNTM and pull up the actual manuscripts. Have fun with that. That is a textual variant. It doesn't change anything, though. It's a call to endurance. Those who lose their life will save it. This is the paradoxical teaching of Jesus. It's nothing new. So while some of you will be put to death, at the same time, a hair from your head will not be destroyed. What is that talking about? Most commentators are in agreement that it is a paradoxical and a vivid way of saying, yes, you may suffer, you will suffer, and you may even suffer death, but you will not ultimately be destroyed. This is a phrase, you can find this in a figure of speech. A hair on their head not being destroyed is a way of talking about someone being kept safe. And this is clearly not referring to physical in this world safety, because he's just said some are going to be put to death. So ultimately then it's talking about what really matters. Like when Jesus says, don't fear the one who can kill the body, but fear the one who can kill the body and the soul with destruction in hell. That's what he's talking about. That even through death, you will ultimately be preserved and not a hair on your head. This also could be, and I lean in the direction that it is, a nod to the resurrection. I think the new creation, new bodies, basically it's a way of saying in the new creation, every hair on your head will be accounted for. Complete deliverance, bodily, forever. But this whole section, regardless of how you take that specifically, this whole section is an allusion to Micah 7. And in Micah 7, the prophet says, he's talking about, just the state of the faithful versus the faithless and how it's intermixed. And in chapter 6, God had given his reeve, his lawsuit against Israel. It's the famous Micah 6:8. What does he require of you but to do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with your God? That's literally what the Disciple Dojo shirt I'm wearing is. Well, after that chapter, then he's talking about Israel's guilt and the punishment that's going to come and the sorry state that Israel is in at that time that Micah is speaking. And Micah is lamenting, the godly have been swept away from the land, that everyone's hands are skilled in doing evil. He's kind of lamenting the same thing that Habakkuk is lamenting, that there's just so much evil, even among God's people who are supposed to be holy, who are supposed to be living according to Torah. And Micah is lamenting that that's not happening. And so chapter 7 starts recounting that. And then look at verse 5, giving guidance to the people. He's saying, in times like this, do not rely on a friend. Don't trust in a close companion. Seal your mouth from the woman who lies in your arms, your spouse. Surely a son considers his father a fool, a daughter opposes her mother, and a daughter-in-law is against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies are the men of his own household. This is the state that Micah the prophet depicted Israel as existing in. And now Jesus coming along is saying, nothing's changed, and it's going to get worse, and it's going to be on account of me. Just like it was in Micah's day on account of Torah, on account of the covenant. People who are faithfully following Yahweh have always been the persecuted remnant. Jesus is saying that's continuing on. And now I am the axis around which it will all turn. And then he ends this. Micah, I love this. This actually, I have a tattoo on my arm, and it's faded now because I got it like 30 years ago in college, but it's a cross and a flame, and it just says Micah 7:7. It's this verse. He says, but I, va'ani, as for me, but I will look to the Lord. I will wait for the God of my salvation. My God will hear me. So I love this. This is my favorite verse in Micah for this reason. Micah's in the face of even family turning away, which is pressure that we can't even fathom in our society. How much worse it would be in an honor and shame family-based kinship society. Yet, even in the midst of that, Micah is firm, and the prophet has resolved to say, but I will look to Yahweh. I will wait for the God of my salvation. And Jesus, Yeshua, name literally means salvation, or he saves, is saying the same thing to his followers. Y'all will be hated by everyone on account of my name, even family. But ultimately, not a hair on your head will be destroyed. And by your endurance, you will possess your life or your soul. Now, in the next video, we're going to look at kind of what Jesus says is going to happen following that. So he's gotten his disciples ready for the persecution. Now he needs to get them ready for the horrors so that they make sure that they are not anywhere near Jerusalem when it all goes down. This is going to be very similar to what we saw in Mark, so we will probably zip through the next section of the Olivet Discourse, the Day of the Lord passage, and then get into the closing parable. So like I said, we may be able to finish in one more video, maybe two, but that's where we're headed as we wrap up Luke's version of the Olivet Discourse. If you found this helpful, if you appreciate this teaching, as always, best way you can show it is by subscribing to this channel. And also, if you want to support the ministry of Disciple Dojo, we rely, our bread and butter, our lifeline are the regular monthly dojo donors, $10 a month, $20 a month, $50, whatever God has blessed you and you're able to give. If you do become a dojo donor and support this ministry on a monthly basis, use the contact form on the website. Shoot me a message that just says I'm a dojo donor and I'd love to get a patch. We have the iron-on patches either in the dark or the light. Just tell me which one of these you want, and I would love to get one in the mail to you just as a thank you for supporting this ministry. You really are the only way we're able to do this. We do not survive on YouTube revenue. We turn our ads off on our long-form teaching videos and mid-roll so that the teaching is not interrupted midway through by ads. And as a result, we are just trusting that God will make up for that by sending more monthly dojo donors every month to keep this ministry going. That'll do for now, though. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more from Luke's Olivet Discourse here at Disciple Dojo. And in the meantime, as always, keep training.